A Korean mafia boss broke his own rule for a poor black waitress due to one act of kindness from her, and this one decision turned their world around. Lee Hyuk-Jin's office occupied the 42nd floor of the Wilshire Grand Center, where Los Angeles sprawled beneath him like a circuit board. Predictable, controllable, distant. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city, but he rarely looked. The view was irrelevant. What mattered lived in spreadsheets, contracts, and the cold mathematics of leverage. "Mr. Lee, the Henderson acquisition papers are ready for your signature." His assistant's voice was professional, measured. Everyone who worked for him learned quickly. Efficiency over familiarity, results over rapport. He signed without looking up, his movements precise as surgical incisions. 38 years old. Self-made billionaire. Zero personal attachments. It wasn't cruelty, it was architecture. Every relationship in Hyuk-Jin's world served a function. Business partners provided opportunities. Employees delivered results. His mother, Madame Kang Hwa, represented family obligation and tradition. Beyond that, nothing. No friends who expected emotional availability. No romantic entanglements that demanded vulnerability. Especially no romantic entanglements that he'd watched emotion destroy his father's business empire. A trusted partner, a beautiful woman, a moment of weakness that cost everything. The lesson branded itself into young Hyuk-Jin's mind. Love is the luxury of fools, and kindness is a liability the successful cannot afford. "Cancel my 8 o'clock dinner reservation," he said, closing his laptop. "Reschedule the Singapore call to tomorrow morning." "Of course, Mr. Lee." The city lights blinked on as dusk settled, transforming Los Angeles into constellations of ambition and desperation. Somewhere down there, people laughed over meals, held hands, believed connection mattered more than conquest. Hyuk-Jin had long ago accepted he wasn't built for that world. His phone buzzed. Another deal closing. Another competitor neutralized. In a modest corner of Koreatown, Wendy Smith unlocked her restaurant's doors as the dinner rush began. Miss Wendy's kitchen glowed in warm script above the imperfect, emotionless efficiency. Trance. Humble compared to the Michelin-starred establishments downtown, but radiating something money couldn't purchase. "Mr. Park, your usual table?" Wendy's smile lit up as the elderly Korean man shuffled inside. She'd already prepared his favorite soup, adding extra vegetables though he'd never paid for them. The small dining room hummed with life. Families crowded around tables. Solo diners found community at the counter. Wendy moved between them like a conductor, remembering names, asking about grandchildren, celebrating small victories, offering comfort for setbacks. This was her empire, built not on calculation but on care. Every plate served with intention. Every customer treated like family. She'd poured her life savings into this place, worked 16-hour days, sacrificed everything comfortable for something meaningful. 2 worlds. 2 philosophies. 2 people who should never meet. But Los Angeles has a way of colliding opposites. The Peninsula Hotel's private conference room had been neutral territory. Park Jae-sung's handshake had been firm, reassuring. The contract terms were favorable, a joint venture that would expand Hyuk-Jin's semiconductor distribution into the Pacific market. "Just one signature," Park said, sliding the documents across mahogany. "Then we celebrate." Hyuk-Jin read every clause twice. Everything aligned perfectly. Too perfectly. The realization hit him mid-signature. The subsidiary clauses, the liability transfers, the carefully buried poison pills that would strip his controlling interest the moment ink dried. "You clever bastard." Hyuk-Jin's pen stopped. Park's smile never wavered. "Business is chess, Hyuk-Jin. You taught me that. This is theft. This is capitalism." Park gestured, and 2 men emerged from the adjacent room. Corporate security, but their eyes held street violence. "Sign, or we'll encourage you." Hyuk-Jin stood, document and signed. "Try." The first man grabbed his shoulder. Hyuk-Jin's elbow found ribs, years of discipline translating to efficient brutality. But the second man was faster, driving a fist into Hyuk-Jin's temple. The room spun. He tasted copper. He fought toward the door, landing one more blow before a chair caught his spine. Someone ripped his jacket. Glass shattered, his phone crushed under expensive shoes. He crashed through the exit, stumbling down service stairs, their shouts echoing behind him. His car sat in valet parking, but the keys were gone, phone destroyed. Blood dripped from his split eyebrow. His designer suit hung torn at the shoulder, white shirt stained crimson. He ran. Through downtown's indifferent crowds, into side streets, his vision tunneling. Koreatown's familiar signs blurred past. His legs moved on autopilot, each step heavier than the last. The adrenaline drained away, leaving only pain and the sickening realization that his empire was crumbling. His knees buckled outside a small restaurant. He caught himself against the doorframe, barely registering the warm light spilling through windows, the faded sign reading Miss Wendy's Kitchen. Before we continue, if you want to discover how Wendy and Lee Hyuk-Jin's impossible love story unfolds, and what happens when a Korean billionaire breaks his iron rule for a woman who showed him pure kindness, make sure to hit the subscribe button on this channel. Drop a comment telling us which country in the world you're watching from. Each view helps bring more heartfelt stories like this one to life. Wendy was wiping down tables when she heard the thud outside. Through the window she saw him, expensive suit, bruise on his face, crumpled against her doorway like discarded trash. Every instinct screamed danger. Injured men in Koreatown meant gang violence, police questions, trouble she couldn't afford. She should call 911. Stay inside. Not her problem. But Wendy had never mastered the art of walking past suffering. She pushed open the door and knelt beside him. His breathing was shallow, face pale beneath bruises already forming. "Sir? Can you hear me? What happened?" His eyes fluttered open, dark, disoriented, surprisingly vulnerable for someone wearing a suit worth more than her monthly rent. "I'm calling an ambulance." "No." His hand caught her wrist weakly. "No hospitals. Please." Wendy hesitated. Everything about this screamed complication. But those eyes held something she recognized. Desperation wrapped in pride, the look of someone who'd rather bleed out than admit weakness. "All right," she heard herself say. "But you're not dying on my doorstep. Can you walk?" She helped him inside, supporting his weight, her small frame surprisingly steady beneath his. The door closed behind them, sealing both their fates. Wendy guided him to a chair in her kitchen, the restaurant's heart where stainless steel gleamed under fluorescent lights. She moved with practiced efficiency, retrieving her first aid kit from beneath the sink. "What happened?" she asked, dampening a clean cloth with warm water. Hyuk-Jin's jaw tightened. "Business meeting went poorly." "Poorly?" She gestured at his torn suit and the stain. "This looks like a war. In my world, they're the same thing." The words came bitter. He watched her approach with the cloth, instinctively flinching. Vulnerability was foreign territory. "Hold still." Her voice carried gentle command. She pressed the warm cloth to his split eyebrow, her touch surprisingly tender for someone he'd met 5 minutes ago. "You'll need stitches for this. No hospitals." Stubborn. But she didn't argue, instead cleaning the wound with careful precision. Her fingers brushed his temple, steadying his face. "So what happened?" "Really?" Hyuk-Jin found himself talking, something he never did. "A partner. Someone I trusted with a joint venture. He orchestrated a betrayal, tried to force my signature on documents that would have cost me everything. When I refused, he gestured at himself. And you fought back. Poorly, as you noted." Wendy's eyes met his, and he saw no pity there, only understanding. "My father used to say the most expensive lessons come from people we trust." She applied antiseptic, her movements gentle despite the sting. "You'll survive this. The question is what you'll learn from it." She worked in silence, bandaging his eyebrow, checking his ribs for fractures, cleaning blood from his collar. When she finished, Hyuk-Jin reached for his wallet, still miraculously intact. "For your trouble." He extracted several $100 bills. "And discretion." Wendy stepped back, hands raised. "I don't want your money. You provided medical care. Time. Resources. Everything has a price." "Not everything." She crossed her arms. "You needed help. I helped." That's the transaction complete. Hyuk-Jin stared at her, genuinely baffled. In his world, every action demanded compensation, every favor accumulated interest. I don't understand. I know. Her smile held sadness. That's the problem, isn't it? You've spent so long calculating the cost of everything, you forgot some things are just human. He looked at the money in his hand, then at her. This woman in a modest apron who'd just dismantled his entire understanding of how the world operated. She'd given freely, expected nothing, and somehow that terrified him more than Park's betrayal. Why? He whispered. Because someone needed it. Wendy turned back to her sink, washing her hands. And because tomorrow, when you're back in your glass tower making million-dollar decisions, maybe you'll remember that kindness exists. Even in Los Angeles. Hyuk-Jin sat in Wendy's kitchen for 20 minutes after she'd finished, phone destroyed, car abandoned, dignity in tatters. Finally, he asked to use her restaurant phone. Mom, he said quietly when Madame Kang Hwa answered. I need you to send the driver. I'll text you the address from. He paused, realizing. I don't have my phone. Wendy slid a piece of paper across the counter with the address already written. She'd anticipated his need. 30 minutes later, a black Mercedes arrived. Madame Kang Hwa emerged, elegant even at 10 p.m., her eyes sharp as surgical steel. She assessed her son's injuries, then Wendy hovering uncertainly by the door. You helped him. Not a question. He needed help, Wendy replied simply. Madame Kang studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. Thank you. She guided Hyuk-Jin toward the car, but he glanced back at the small restaurant, at the woman who'd dismantled his worldview in one evening. I'll return, he said. Wendy smiled softly. You don't have to. But he did. The next afternoon, Hyuk-Jin walked into Miss Wendy's kitchen wearing jeans and a plain black shirt, clothes he'd forgotten he owned. Without his tailored armor, he looked younger, almost approachable. Wendy glanced up from the register, surprise flickering across her face. You came back. You make good coffee, he lied. He hadn't tasted it. She laughed, gesturing to an empty table. Sit anywhere. He chose the corner, watching her work. She moved through the lunch rush like a conductor, remembering orders without writing them down, checking on the elderly couple by the window, joking with the college student studying at the counter. Every interaction genuine, unrehearsed. So what's your dream? He asked when she brought his coffee. For this place. Wendy leaned against the counter, considering. Honestly, I'd love to expand the kitchen, hire more staff, so I'm not here 16 hours daily. Maybe add a small stage for live music on weekends. Create a real community space. She smiled wistfully. But dreams and reality rarely share zip codes. Why this business? You could have done anything. Because food is love made visible. My grandmother taught me that. Her eyes warmed with memory. She said when you feed someone with care, you're not just filling their stomach. You're reminding them they matter. That someone noticed they were hungry. Hyuk-Jin thought about his world, transactions, leverage, strategic advantages. Nobody noticed if he was hungry. Nobody cared beyond what he could provide. He returned the next day. And the next. Each visit, he learned something new. Wendy's grandmother raised her after her parents died. The restaurant represented everything she'd saved for a decade. She knew every regular's story, celebrated their victories, mourned their losses. Her life wasn't simple, it was intentional. Every choice mattered because she'd decided it would. And somewhere between the third and fourth visit, Hyuk-Jin realized he wasn't studying her anymore, that he was learning from her. Madame Kang Hwa had built her reputation on reading people the way her son read balance sheets, with ruthless accuracy. When her driver informed her that Hyuk-Jin had visited the same modest Koreatown restaurant 5 days consecutively, she knew something fundamental had shifted. Take me there, she commanded. But park 2 blocks away. She entered Miss Wendy's kitchen during the late afternoon lull, dressed simply. No jewelry, no designer labels that screamed wealth. Just another customer seeking coffee and observation. Wendy approached with her customary warmth. Welcome. Sit anywhere you'd like. Madame Kang chose a table with clear sight lines, ordering tea and watching. She observed how Wendy moved, graceful despite exhaustion, attentive without being obsequious. When an elderly Korean man struggled with his bill, counting coins with arthritic fingers, Wendy quietly reduced his total. "Mr. Park, I miscalculated. You actually have a senior discount today." The man's relief was palpable. Madame Kang knew no such discount existed. She watched Wendy console a young mother whose toddler had spilled juice everywhere, bringing extra napkins without judgment. Witnessed her remembering a regular's daughter's graduation, producing a small congratulatory cupcake on the house. Small acts, each one deliberate, genuine. When Wendy brought her tea, Madame Kang spoke in Korean. "You run this place alone?" "Most days," Wendy replied in surprisingly fluent Korean. "My grandmother taught me. She said if you're going to serve a community, you should speak their language." Madame Kang's eyes sharpened with approval. "Wise woman. The wisest." Wendy's smile held affection and loss. "She's been gone 3 years, but I hear her voice every day in this kitchen." After Wendy moved away, Madame Kang sat for another hour, her tea growing cold, her assessment complete. This woman possessed something rare in Los Angeles: authenticity without performance, strength without hardness, generosity without calculation. Her son needed exactly this. That evening, she summoned Hyuk-Jin to her Bel Air estate. "The restaurant owner," she began without preamble. "Wendy Smith." Hyuk-Jin's expression carefully neutral. "What about her? You've visited 5 times this week. Don't insult me by pretending it's about the food." Madame Kang poured tea with practiced precision. "I went today. Observed her. Mother, a man with your wealth and power needs a wife with a soul like hers." She met his eyes with absolute certainty. Not someone calculating advantages or social climbing. Someone who understands that true strength is caring when it costs you something. "You can't be serious." "Mother, I've never been more serious." Madame Kang's voice softened. "You've built an empire, Hyuk-Jin, but you've forgotten how to live." She remembers. And whether you realize it yet or not, that's why you keep returning. She reminds you of the person you could be. The person you were before you confused isolation with strength. Hyuk-Jin stared at his mother, speechless. "Court her properly," Madame Kang commanded. "Or I will introduce myself and do it for you." Hyuk-Jin stood outside Miss Wendy's kitchen as closing time approached, rehearsing words that should have been simple. He'd negotiated billion-dollar mergers without hesitation, yet asking this woman to dinner left his palms damp. Wendy emerged, locking the door, and startled when she saw him. "You're here late. I wanted to ask you something." He straightened, falling into business posture before catching himself. "Would you have dinner with me?" "Not here. My home." Her eyebrows rose. "Your home. I want to show you something. My world. It's only fair, you've shown me yours." Wendy studied him, weighing risks against curiosity. "All right, but I drive myself. I'll send the address." The Bel Air mansion sprawled across 3 acres, all glass and modern lines with the city glittering below. Wendy's modest car looked comically out of place beside the circular fountain. Hyuk-Jin met her at the entrance, and for the first time, she saw nervousness in his carefully controlled features. "Welcome." He'd prepared dinner himself, a detail that shocked her. Korean dishes arranged with meticulous care, each one traditional, authentic. "My mother's recipes," he explained. "She insisted I learn," said a man who can't feed himself can't truly lead. They ate on the terrace, Los Angeles spreading beneath them like scattered diamonds. Wendy waited for him to speak first. "I had a rule," Hyuk-Jin began finally. "Strictly business. No personal attachments. Especially no romantic ones. My father fell in love with the wrong woman, which was my stepmother. She was working with his competitor. The betrayal destroyed everything he'd built. I watched him crumble, watched love turn into a weapon. He met her eyes. So I decided love was a luxury I couldn't afford. And now I realize my rule was just another prison." His voice carried unfamiliar vulnerability. "You helped me when I was broken, expecting nothing, offering pure human kindness. I haven't been able to stop thinking about that, about you. How you move through the world caring about people despite every reason not to." Wendy's breath caught. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Opening up, letting someone matter. It terrifies me more than any business rival. But you, he reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers. You make me want to try. To be more than transactions and strategies. To remember what it means to feel. Wendy placed her hand in his, warmth meeting warmth. That's the bravest thing I've heard anyone say. I'm falling in love with you, Wendy Smith. And I'm breaking every rule I made to survive. She smiled, squeezing his hand gently. Good. Those rules were keeping you from living anyway. The boardroom on the 42nd floor had always been Hyuk-Jin's domain, a space where his words shaped reality and dissent died in silence. But today the air held something different, challenge. Let's address these issues now. Vice Chairman Kim Dong-woo leaned forward, his smile sharp as broken glass. Our CEO has been distracted lately. Hyuk-Jin's expression remained neutral. My focus remains on company growth. Q3 projections exceed. Your focus has been on a restaurant in Koreatown. Kim slid a folder across the table. Photographs spilled out, Hyuk-Jin entering Miss Wendy's kitchen, leaving with Wendy, dinner on his terrace. 7 visits in 2 weeks. You've declined 3 international meetings. The Singapore deal is stalling because you won't travel. I've conducted those meetings remotely, while our competitors sense weakness. Director Park Soo-jin's voice cut cold. Lee Hyuk-Jin doesn't miss international negotiations. He doesn't delegate critical deals. And he certainly doesn't spend afternoons in modest restaurants when billions hang in balance. The other board members shifted, their silence speaking volumes. Are you questioning my judgment? Hyuk-Jin's tone dropped dangerously low. We're questioning your priorities. Kim spread his hands reasonably. You've built this company on ruthless efficiency and emotional detachment. Now you're seen dining with a woman from, how do I say this delicately, outside our social circle. Competitors are whispering that Lee Hyuk-Jin has gone soft. That personal entanglements have compromised his edge. My personal life affects shareholder confidence. Park interrupted. 3 major investors called this week asking if you're stepping down. Your behavior is erratic by your own established standards. You've always maintained strictly professional relationships. No attachments. No distractions. That discipline is what made us trust you with billions. Hyuk-Jin's jaw tightened. He thought of Wendy's hand in his, the way she'd looked at him when he admitted his fear. The lightness he'd felt confessing vulnerability. The woman in question, Kim continued smoothly, owns a struggling restaurant with declining revenue and mounting debt. Some might wonder if she's positioned herself strategically. Careful. Hyuk-Jin's voice could freeze blood. Kim raised his hands in mock surrender. I'm simply expressing what others are thinking. A CEO's romantic choices affect corporate perception. And right now, perception suggests our leader has lost his legendary focus. Director Choi spoke quietly. We need the old Lee Hyuk-Jin back. The one who prioritized empire over emotion. Before this complication, the word hung in the air like an indictment. Complication. Hyuk-Jin stood, buttoning his jacket with deliberate precision. This meeting is adjourned. But as he left, he felt their eyes boring into his back, calculating, measuring, waiting for the moment his newfound humanity became exploitable weakness. The Seoul Los Angeles Business Summit filled the Beverly Hilton Ballroom with 700 of the most powerful executives in international commerce. Hyuk-Jin stood backstage, adjusting his tie, preparing for the keynote address that would define his company's future. Vice Chairman Kim appeared at his elbow. The Chong Corporation representatives are here. They're ready to finalize the merger, $2 billion, access to Asian markets. But they have one condition. Hyuk-Jin's eyes narrowed. We agreed on terms last month. They've added a stipulation. Kim's voice dropped. They want assurance that your recent, personal distractions won't affect leadership stability. Chairman Chong is traditional. He believes a CEO dating outside appropriate social circles demonstrates poor judgment. Kim paused meaningfully. Distance yourself from the restaurant owner publicly tonight, and the deal closes tomorrow. You orchestrated this. I protected our interests. $2 billion, Hyuk-Jin. Your entire board supports this. One woman or an empire, choose wisely. Hyuk-Jin looked toward the ballroom where Wendy sat in the audience. She'd been terrified to attend, feeling out of place among the designer gowns and corporate elite. But she'd come because he asked, wearing a simple, elegant dress, her grace outshining every calculated performance around her. 5 minutes, Mr. Lee, the stage manager called. Kim pressed. This is who you are, the man who makes hard choices. Don't throw away everything for sentiment. Hyuk-Jin walked on stage to thunderous applause. The teleprompter glowed with his prepared speech. Strategic visions, market projections, corporate philosophy. He read the first 3 lines, then stopped. His eyes found Wendy in the crowd. I'm going to deviate from my prepared remarks. His voice carried across the silent ballroom. 3 weeks ago, I was betrayed by someone I trusted. I was injured, disoriented, bleeding in Koreatown. A woman I'd never met brought me into her restaurant and tended my wounds. She asked nothing, expected nothing, simply helped because it was right. Murmurs rippled through the audience. That woman taught me something I'd forgotten building this empire. Success without humanity is just elaborate isolation. I've spent 15 years making profitable choices and cold calculations. I built an empire, but I lost myself. He looked directly at Wendy, her eyes wide with surprise. Wendy Smith reminded me that kindness isn't weakness, it's courage. That caring about someone isn't distraction, it's motivation. And that a life measured only in profit margins is a life not worth living. He paused. So yes, I'm in love with her. And anyone who sees that as poor judgment doesn't understand what true success looks like. The ballroom erupted, some in applause, others in shocked silence. Kim's face went white with fury. But Hyuk-Jin only smiled, having finally chosen correctly. 6 months later, Hyuk-Jin returned to where everything changed. The doorstep of Miss Wendy's kitchen, now closed for the evening. Wendy emerged, wiping her hands on her apron, surprised to find him kneeling. Wendy Smith, you saved my life twice. Once when you bandaged my wounds, and again when you reminded me I had a heart worth saving. He opened a velvet box containing a simple, elegant ring. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down her face. Yes. 1,000 times yes. The wedding was intimate, Madame Kang Hwa beaming with approval, a small gathering of Wendy's loyal customers, and a handful of Hyuk-Jin's associates who'd supported his transformation. No grand ballroom, just the restaurant's back garden strung with lights, where 2 worlds finally merged completely. Vice Chairman Kim had resigned 3 days after the summit. Half the board followed. But the company thrived under Hyuk-Jin's new leadership philosophy, one that valued innovation and loyalty over ruthless calculation. The Chong deal fell through, but 5 better partnerships emerged from executives who respected his authenticity. Hyuk-Jin kept his promise. He provided capital to expand Miss Wendy's kitchen into 3 locations across Los Angeles, each one maintaining the warmth and community focus of the original. Wendy hired staff, implemented her grandmother's recipes on a larger scale, and created the community spaces she'd always dreamed of, complete with weekend live music. But she also kept her promise. One evening, as they closed the restaurant together, Hyuk-Jin watched Wendy laugh with elderly Mr. Park, remembering his usual order without asking. He realized his old life, the cold efficiency, the emotional detachment, had been survival, not living. What are you thinking? Wendy asked, sliding her hand into his. That I spent 15 years building an empire, but it took you 5 minutes to teach me what actually matters. And what's that? That the bravest thing we can do is care. Even when it costs us everything. He pulled her close. Especially then. Wendy smiled against his shoulder. Now you're learning. Together they locked the door on another day, not of transactions but of life truly lived. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness can change everything, and that love isn't about where you come from, it's about who you choose to become. Drop a comment below. What moment resonated with you most? Was it Wendy helping the injured stranger without asking questions, Madame Kang Hwa recognizing Wendy's golden heart, or Hyuk-Jin choosing love over his empire at the business summit? Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the simplest act of compassion can lead you to the love of your life.